On another jumbo-length episode, we take a break from talking about how much we love Bangkok to discuss the city's ugly, dusty, dirty side.
Prior to that, we'll tell you about our bike-tastic weekend, because sometimes you just got to get out of the city, right?
So put down your brooms and dustpans, kids. Here's episode 2.46 of the Bangkok Podcast. Sawadee krap and welcome to the Bangkok Podcast. My name is Greg Jorgensen, a Canadian who sought my fame and fortune in Thailand in 2001, and despite finding neither, I'm still here.
And I am Evo Terra, an American expat living full-time in Bangkok since the beginning of 2016. Thanks for joining us, and welcome to the Big Mango.
Now, as is customary, we start this episode with a big thanks to our supporters on Patreon who help us keep the show going and free of annoying ads. And as is also the custom for supporters of the show shoutout level, we have someone to thank.
Indeed we do, Greg, and this week it is Christine Foti. Now, there's a name I can pronounce easily, unlike last week's show.
Are you sure it's not Fati?
Shush.
Maybe it's Greek and it's Fashracha.
You're killing me, Smalls.
Well, as always, I like to check the mettle of our supporters to make sure that they are truly excellent people. So I did a little bit of research on Christine, and you know what I found out? A few years back, she called her cable company to cancel her service. She's one of these, they call the cord cutters there.
Yes.
And she said, I want to cancel my cable service. And they were so scared of losing such a stellar customer, they offered to pay her if she didn't leave.
Wow.
So she called the phone company. She called the power company. She called the water company. They all did the same thing. So now she makes a nice chunk of change from companies that simply want to be associated with her. So that's pretty nice.
We do like ingenuity in our listeners. That is what we demand. If you would like to support the show and also get access to bonus content like we just recorded previously, talking about all sorts of things like being terribly rained out in Bangkok, and lots of cool swag, and even, as you just witnessed, have Greg make up something interesting about you, head on over to patreon.com/Bangkok Podcast and sign up and get on our list of great, wonderful supporters today.
Right on. Well, before we jump into the topic of this week, which is the unsightly side of living in Bangkok, let's have a quick conversation about this past weekend.
Yes.
So now we were both on bikes, but had kind of different experiences. You went down to Hua Hin, is that right?
Yeah, I went down to Hua Hin for the long weekend, which is only 95 miles away and takes about 5.5 hours by bike, apparently. That's a long...
That's a long drive.
Long drive to get there. But when I got there, it was wonderful. We had a real good time.
Have you been there before?
No, it was our first visit to that side of the Gulf of Thailand. That first time to Hua Hin. We've been further down and then Chumphon and the other areas. But yeah, first visit to Hua Hin.
It's a nice little town. It's gotten really busy over the past 5 or 6 years. Some new malls going up, a lot of traffic, new night markets, tons of tourists. But it still has that small town charm.
And the beach was mostly deserted. We went to the beach, like the Hua Hin beach, which is where all the tourists are supposed to be, and we weren't by ourselves by any stretch, but it was not crowded. I mean, you go to Pattaya, and that's jam-packed all the time, but it's a tiny segment of beach. This beach was wide and deep, and nobody was out there. Oh, that's not good. Not nobody was out there. There was just plenty of room, for things like horses to go up and down the beach, which was totally bizarre. I don't get that at all. But
did the empty beaches have anything to do with the fact you were wearing a polka dot bikini?
Usually that brings a little bit larger crowd, but I didn't really, advertise that's what I was doing.
Right. Well, funny. My experience is the opposite. Usually people run screaming, but whatever.
Yes.
I've always found the beaches there to be sort of substandard, subpar, especially when you've been to some of the islands and some of the places that have, the soft white powder sand and the emerald blue water.
Well,
but I've always found Hua Hin to have sort of gray sand and gray water, but it's still a beach. So.
Yeah, and it's certainly not beautiful white sand. It's a lot whiter sand than some of the places I've seen before. But yeah, you're not going to find emerald water in the Gulf of Thailand. You're going to find green water, if you're lucky, in the Gulf of Thailand. It's just it's a gulf. I'm sorry, it's
a shallow gulf.
It's a shallow gulf, and just about 5 kilometers offshore is where all of the effluent dumps. So yeah, you're going to get just gunk. Sorry.
You're really selling this place as the land of smiles and the paradise lost.
Yeah, the TAT is not going to hire me anytime real soon. So I went to the beach and got burned. What did you do?
I also went on a bike ride, but a pedal bike. I finally got out with some friends, and we did this fantastic ride, one of my favorite routes that goes west from Sepantaksan out towards Puttamantan. And we did about a 55-kilometer round trip, which was perfect length for me. But there's one really funny part because the route out and the route back are different, but they're separated by about a kilometer. So we basically rode west, and then we go south, and then we go east to get back into town.
Yep.
But I didn't want to go all the way to the end of the route, so I made a little shortcut that connected the in path and the out path. And along this shortcut, it worked out fine, but where we needed to connect to the path going back, on the map it looked fine, but it turned out it was actually a bridge over the path that we needed to be on, which was on the side of a clong. So we were like, well, and we couldn't look at the map, and there was no easy way to get around it. So we ended up, one guy jumped off of the bridge down to the pathway below, which was, I don't know, about 2 meters, 2.5 meters, 3 meters down, and we passed the bikes down to each other. And so there's all these three. Well, okay. The other two guys are in significantly better shape than I am. But there's me, this big fat guy, sort of shimmying down the side of the bridge, trying to fit my giant fat ass on this, 6-inch wide ledge before I leap off to what seems like a 12-foot drop.
Yeah, right.
But it's actually only about 4 feet.
Sure.
But we made it through. But it was great. That's a perfect example of the type of bike rides that you can have in Bangkok when you get out and you're like, oh, we need to go there. How do we do this?
Yeah.
And usually you come up with some kind of MacGyver solution, but it's always fun. So thankfully my knees survived the jump, and I made it back in one piece.
Yeah, and that's the reality of living here, isn't it? What looks like it's going to be okay on a map isn't. You'll turn down some street, and it's like, I guess all I have to do to continue, because the map says I should, is get that locked door open somehow. Yeah, all the time.
Oh, this bike path goes into a wall.
You'd think they would figure that kind of stuff out. So, well, now the photo that you posted about what looked like, I wasn't sure what you were doing. I saw somebody's head down below these two concrete paths, and you are handing a bike down to him. Now it totally makes sense. I get it now.
Yeah, it was a fun ride, and I only got a little bit sunburned, and only had to take 2 ibuprofen. So
I wish I could
say
the same. But anyhow.
Well, speaking of exploring Bangkok on a bike, I think it's fair to say that both you and I love Bangkok and all of its associated twists and turns. But as with most relationships, there are things that drive you a bit crazy. One of those things with Bangkok is that while it's certainly a fascinating city, it is not a very attractive city.
Yeah, it's not a very attractive city. And my very first time to Thailand, when I got off of the plane and met someone for the first time being here, is a French citizen that was living in Thailand, wasn't in Bangkok. When I got off the plane and met him, his question is, why are you here? Because this place is a shithole.
How dare he?
Words.
How dare he say that about my beloved city?
That's kind of what I was thinking as well. But I've kind of taken that to heart, and there are certainly some things that are beautiful, but there are some certain things that are not beautiful. My friends, for example, when I speak with people on Facebook or they start a Skype call with me, it's typically begins with something like, "So how's the day in paradise?" Because that's what they think. They think that
really?
I'm living in some beautiful tropical island, not in a giant metropolitan area that serves 14 million people.
Right.
It's a very, very different.
Right. I had a friend come over here years ago, and he said he liked it, but he was a little bit disappointed because he thought that Bangkok would be much more spiritual and introspective. And he's like, I didn't expect to see Starbucks and 7-Elevens on every corner.
Yeah. Well, there's a Watt right behind that 7-Eleven, so you've got your spirituality. But we're not talking about spiritualism. We wanted to talk about looks because we are in the tropics. We do have palm trees. We have greenery. We have scenery. We have beautiful things to look at. But the same time, we have some things that are a little less attractive.
Well, one of the things that I noticed when I first came here was, and this was in 2001, was that there was an incredible amount of ugly, rusty, abandoned buildings. And I'm talking big, tall office buildings. Now, these were remnants of the 1997 financial crash, which decimated the economy of Thailand and surrounding countries. And what happened was a lot of these giant projects just were abandoned because the bottom dropped out of the market. No one had any money to invest in anything, and everyone just kind of went home and left these buildings to rot. And most of them in the ensuing decade or so have been reclaimed and rebuilt up. So you don't have many. A perfect example of what it looked like was the Ghost Tower down on Sathorn Road, right on the river there. That giant building with all those balconies around it that right now has a 15-story tall iPhone ad. But imagine buildings like that all over Bangkok. And that was what my first impression of Bangkok was like, oh God, this is an ugly, half abandoned city.
Yeah, that's very, that matches a lot with what I thought as well. And it's not just Bangkok, because my first 3 months were not in Bangkok, in Thailand. And the same thing had happened. There were buildings that were probably, again, from that same era. Construction that had begun, large, 8, 9, 10-story buildings, concrete platforms that looks like they just needed to go do the interior, and they're just left.
Right.
Left to rot, left to, for squatters to be in, just all over the place. So it was worse, is what you're saying. It's actually not as bad now because they've reclaimed some. Well, that's good to know. I can't tell that because I still see quite a lot of them. But yeah, they demolish a building. I've never seen them I've seen one building being demolished, but these just tend to stay, which doesn't make any sense to me because the property values here, all you got to do is put up a condo and people will buy the damn thing. They won't live in it, but they'll buy it. So I just don't understand why they continue. Why didn't somebody knock those damn things down? I don't get it.
Well, from what I understand, and my knowledge of this is very poor, but from what I understand, there is no property tax in Thailand. So if you own a plot of land, like if you own a plot of land in Canada, you have to pay property tax on that every year, no matter what you do with it. So you better do something with it. But in Thailand, I don't think that people have to pay property tax. So if you own a lot in the middle of Bangkok, you can just sit on it and wait until it accrues, until everyone starts to build up around you, and suddenly it's worth 20 times what you paid for it.
Wow. Yeah.
So there really isn't any motivation or impetus for people to develop, or say you've built a shop house that was built in the 1950s.
Yeah.
It's just sort of sitting there abandoned and decaying and slowly falling apart. Like, what do I care? I'll just leave it and let it rot while the land it sits on is worth $20 million more every year, kind of thing.
That's probably true. Your summation seems right to me. The one thing that's odd is Thailand looks up in a big way to China. And we like China as a trading partner. We like China as a trading partner because we can buy things from China and not pay import fees. Yay. It's wonderful. But China has a interesting take on that. If you leave an abandoned building or a lot that is not well maintained, the government would just come in and take it.
Oh, yeah?
And would say it's ours, and we're going to build a park there, or do whatever else. Which, that's the power of the single-party system. You can just do things like that without fear of repercussions. But it would be great, I would think. And again, I'm not trying to tell Thailand how to run Thailand because I do not know. But it'd be awesome if something were to happen with those empty lots or those abandoned buildings, and we turn them into a nice, lovely thing to look at. But that's just wishful thinking.
Yeah,
just wishful thinking. On that note of the buildings that are abandoned, it's not just those. There's a spreading amount of blight, if you will, that I notice even more so than I notice the abandoned buildings, and that's just the lack of maintenance on buildings that are occupied. I mean, take my condo, for example, which you can look out your window and you can see my condo.
It's much taller than my condo. My condo's wee.
Yes, yours is a Nitnoi. Mine is a Yun, or what's big? Yen? No.
Yai.
Yen is cold. It's not cold in here. Right, so mine's much taller than that one. But if you look closely, what you will notice in this building, which is I think only about 6 or 7 years old, is that huge sections of paint on the side of the building are peeling off.
Yeah, yeah. They did for some reason when they build a building, it looks great and they paint it, and that's the last bit of work that
Right.
someone does on it.
All done. We don't do anything else. We might clean your windows, but repaint? Have you lost your mind? That
Yeah, and it's a shame because after 5 years, everything looks kind of shoddy and crappy.
Yeah, I mean, we live in a humid environment. We have this black mold stuff. We have just the pollution from being in the city. We have rains that happen nonstop, and with an exposed concrete, it just looks gross. You know what you fix that with? Paint. Just paint
Yeah.
the damn thing. But no.
I have an interesting story about this, and it's sort of related to this, and I'll tell it really quickly. But a few months back, I was in the swimming pool with my son, and I had a T-shirt on because I'm fat and it's embarrassing to be in the pool. I look like
Yes.
a whale. But there's this old woman who lives in my building, and she's really annoying. She's this nosy old biddy that just is not happy unless other people are unhappy. Anyway, she called the building maintenance guy over, and she said to him, "This guy's against the rule. You're only supposed to wear a swimming suit in the swimming pool, not a T-shirt." So he told me, and I was like, so basically I took my shirt off and was like, "Fine, you stupid bitch." And I went and complained, and I was talking to a friend of mine who is very wise, and he's been in Thailand many, many decades. And I said, "This cow, she made me take off her shirt. I mean, come on. I mean, how petty do you have to be?" And he said, "Well, look at it from her perspective. I mean, buildings in Thailand, once they're built, they're left. And no one cares about how they look or how they're run or how they're managed." And maybe she was one of the people who is trying to maintain a sense of order and saying, "Look, these are the rules. If everyone sticks to them, we're all going to benefit from them." And as stupid as that was, one of the rules was no T-shirts in the swimming pool. So he's like, maybe that was just her way of trying to maintain like a little bit of decorum about the building. And maybe she also does that with like, hey, when you paint a new parking spot, make sure the paint is really nice. Or when you put in some plants, make sure you do it so it looks beautiful and not just a half-assed job. So I kind of get it. And I was like, yeah, okay, maybe you're right.
Yeah, I can see that.
But generally, what we're saying is right. Once a building goes up, that's the last thing anyone thinks about it.
Yeah, we love our exposed to the elements concrete, and it's just rotten. I mean, again, I really wish they put a coat of paint on some of these things to make things look better. But maybe your friend's right. Maybe we do. There is a subset of other people that live in this town that are saying maybe there's some tiny things we can do. I'll applaud her for her efforts.
Painting a building must cost a few million baht.
Oh, yeah,
So
yeah.
that's a pretty big investment. Making some guy take off his T-shirt is probably a bit easier to do.
That is very, very true.
Well, I mentioned earlier that the Ghost Tower on Saton Road has a huge Apple sign on it now, and that's quite popular. A lot of buildings use these polyvinyl signs, small, medium, big, and gigantic, for various different things. Sometimes they're just advertising something, but a lot of times you'll see them sort of recycled into like sunshades and awnings for rain and things like that.
Yeah.
And it's functional, but it doesn't look very nice.
No, that is true. I mean, you see what appear to be ads that are advertising something that hasn't been made in 20 years, but they put it on a polyvinyl sign, and some ingenuing Thai person said, this would make a great rain cover, or a great sunshade, as you're talking about, or just a side, something to put on this side of the building for no real apparent reason. Yeah, they're all over. They're very ingenious of how they use them. I've seen some stalls, some little food stalls that are completely constructed out of recycled polyvinyl signs for, again, soft drinks that haven't existed in 20 years. It's just amazing how they do that.
Right, giant Lord of the Rings posters is you're sheltering your card table from the rain as you eat some chicken or something like that.
Yeah.
But it's not. Yeah, it's not pretty, but it does show a pretty amazing dedication to ingenuity. And Thais are really good at that, especially when they recycle soda bottles and other plastic things like that. You can sometimes see them used as bird feeders and mud flaps on tuk-tuks and things like that.
You're right.
And it's colorful. It's kitschy. I wouldn't say it's ugly, but it's not sleek.
No, it's by no means sleek. You're exactly right. It is just they serve a function. And your comment about the mud flap on a motorbike, I saw it today. I'm sitting in traffic because traffic was terrible because of the rain. As I'm right in front of me, there is a guy on a motorbike, and I looked at the back of his bike. I was like, what is that underneath his license plate? And he had taken what is a real estate sign, advertising some new condo somewhere, and cut it down to just the size ties that would go underneath his license plate, hanging down so that he wouldn't get, water flipped up on his back when he drives through.
Yeah.
Ingenious, wonderful. Looks like crap. Don't get me wrong. It
My
looks.
favorite is when they rip off the branch of a tree with leaves and stuff still on it, and they just stick that in the back of their seat. And you've got this leafy branch sticking out of the back of their bike. Hey, it works.
And that's also how they keep their bike seats from getting hot. I'll see that all the time. Especially when I get out of town, when there's more vegetation on the side of the road, whether these little palm fronds are growing, they will go hack down a palm frond and lay it across the motorbike seat, and then go off to do whatever they're doing, fishing or swimming or eating something, so that is a sun protector, and that makes sense. That makes perfect sense, because while I wear pants almost all the time, it's rare to see me in shorts, so it doesn't impact me. It certainly impacts my lovely bride. So when we were down in Joaquin, every time we got back on the bike for a good 5 minutes, she was yelping because she puts her bare thighs on the motorbike with a nice, and of course, what color is my seat? The same color as every seat, black. Sun absorbing, heat re-radiating black. Yeah.
You know what else I saw one time? I've seen it a bunch of times, but only recently I found out what it was for. Is that people put like little boards or signs or plastic whatever they can find, leaning up against their hubcaps.
Huh?
Have you seen that? Yeah, their car or truck is parked along the side of the road, and they've got either a nice little board or a crappy broken wooden sign or something. Yeah. Leaning up against the thing. You know what it's for?
No.
It's to stop dogs taking a leak on the wheel.
Ah.
Pretty smart.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Will it stop the moto taxi driver from taking a leak on the wheel? 'Cause I see that happen on the side of the road much more than dogs in this country.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, we haven't mentioned the granddaddy of all things that make Bangkok look kind of ugly, and that is the unbelievable, unfollowable jumble of telephone lines on top of every telephone pole. This insane tornado, Tasmanian devil twisted knot of cables. Yeah. And, oh God, they sure are ugly. And I don't know how anyone fixes a telephone line around here.
Well, luckily they are trying it right now up near National Stadium. They have now buried new cables, and just this week have started removing, and I've seen some pictures, removing the actual lines. And there are dumpsters. Like, think about a drop-off dumpster if you were doing, remodeling work in your home, and you called the city and said, bring me a dumpster. And they brought you a giant dumpster. Picture like 5 of those, and they are filled with loops of teleco cables that they have pulled down. So,
that have been up in the elements for 15 years.
Yeah. So obviously all the rubber's all corroded and stuff, but I'm assuming the copper and stuff inside of it is probably still worth something back into recycling. I can't imagine they're throwing that away. But you're exactly right. That jumbled mess of teleco wires, it factors into the artwork. I saw artwork when we were in Joaquin, and it shows that snake of cables, and it's just part of the scenery that exists here today. And to me, it's terrible because some of these buildings are kind of gorgeous. They've done some work. They've done some interesting architectural elements. Lots of arches and lots of beautiful balconies that no one would be caught dead on. Of course, now on those beautiful balconies, we're putting our air conditioning units, so we can't get out there any longer. But that's fine, because you can't see that second or third level because it's hidden behind this line of telecommunication cables, which are just blocking the view for everybody. Don't look up.
I'm glad they're finally doing something about it, but they're, like you said, they're slowly going to install some underground pipes and things like that and slowly start to move them underground. But it's going to take a long time. But I'm glad some thought is being put into it anyway.
Yeah. I'm glad. Hopefully, I will. They'll do enough of them in the areas in which I live so that we can see some of the more beautiful things that are happening. Of course, then somebody would have to do 2 things. One, remove all the polyvinyl signs that are on those second balconies blocking the light, and paint the building so that it's actually worth looking at. But, it is possible.
Well, we haven't even talked about the pavements, which are buckled and crumbling, and sometimes you'll be walking along and there's a hole, a full-on, 6 inches across hole in the sidewalk that goes down 3, 4, 6 feet. Yeah. And someone's put a little spindly twig from a tree down the hole and stuck an upside-down Red Bull bottle on top of the twig, I guess is some kind of a warning for people not to stick them. And of course, there's no trash cans.
None.
or bins, as our UK friends would call them.
Right.
But they're so hard to find.
Yeah. It's just near impossible. If you go to a BTS station, that's about the only place I can find them. But yeah, like I think you and I have talked about this previously on the program, where we have walked for many meters, blocks in some cases, carrying an empty cup that I would love to throw away, but if there were only a location to throw that away. But no, not so much. With one interesting exception, Greg. So from my condo, when I look over at your condo, and I'm waving to you now, hi, Greg, in between the two of us is a garbage collection. It's not really garbage collection. I don't want to say I've got a dump below, because I don't, but it's where the garbage trucks kind of coordinate. I guess it's the motor pool, if you will, of the garbage collection services. And they go right down this little subsoil between my place and Chalawanakon, right? And I can see it out my window. I see it every single day. And inside of there are usually 5 or 6 of these green garbage trucks and a bunch of other smaller trucks and the motorbikes and trash cans. I can see actually big, like the rollout to the side of the street trash cans that we used to have. Those are down there. This place is the most well-organized city municipal thing I have ever seen in this state, in this country. This is amazing. I'm looking at it right now. They have swept all of the concrete. They do trash can sorting here. They will take a trash truck and they will go through and pull out the plastic and then pull out the metal and pull out other things. All that happens here. So you would expect this to be a giant, greasy, nasty mess. No, it is clean. The trash cans are all lined up perfectly, like soldiers in a row. Everything is neat and organized. I don't know how they managed to do that down here where the trash is, but nowhere else in the city.
Hey man, these guys go out into the world and they spend all day sorting and picking up and throwing away our crap and garbage and misused items and ignored trash cans. They want to come back to their intergalactic headquarters and they want to make it look nice.
That makes perfect sense to me. And yeah, you dealt with that detritus all day. You're saying we're going to do you one better. So good on you, trash men. Good on you. Can I put you in charge of city infrastructure stuff? Because you guys rock.
Right. But it's interesting about saying all this. The one thing I will say is that over the years, I've noticed a pretty consistent element of a lot of visitors and friends who come through Bangkok, and a lot of them comment on how clean it is. And when they first started saying it, I was like, what? Clean?
Yeah.
And you think about it, and I can kind of see it. I mean, when Westerners think of an Asian city in a developing country of 14 million people, or 10 or 12 or whatever it is, you expect an absolute disaster. And while some parts of Bangkok certainly border on that, I mean, you have people in those orange vests, the armies of street cleaners who are out every day sweeping up. There's no leaves on the street. There's very little garbage, at least on the streets. Of course, it piles and accumulates in abandoned lots and corners and here and there. But when you think about it, there's not a lot of really messy streets. There's crumbling old and poorly planned infrastructure, but it's not like you're wading through garbage.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. So here's my suggestion. Half of those people that have I wanted to say brooms, but they really look like more collections of sticks that work really, really well at cleaning up the streets, obviously. Let's take half of those broomsticks away and give them paint rollers and power washers.
Nice.
Then we could do some real good here in the city. Once again, Evo solves all of Thailand's problems.
Wow. You got to make a series of these or something like that. Evo solves your problems. Well, obviously, all that being said, don't get us wrong. Both Evo and I really love Bangkok.
Amen.
It's a great city, and it is not dangerous. And like I said, it is surprisingly clean from a certain perspective. But at the same time, I wouldn't be terribly upset if they maybe clean things up a bit and put a few things away in some of the hidden corners that don't need to be in plain sight.
One of those things that has to be made in plain sight, Greg, would be everyone's favorite segment of the program, and that is something we call Love, Loathe, or Leave, where we look at one little minor aspect of living in Bangkok and find out if it's something that the two of us love about living in Bangkok, loathe about expat life, or if it's something we hate so much that it's going to make us leave the country before too terribly long. This week, you have the honors, my friend Greg.
I got it. And this This is going to be a controversial one. It would be akin to me going to Italy and saying, I don't really like the pizza, or me going to America saying, I'm not a big fan of the hamburgers. But what do you think about fish sauce?
Fish sauce.
Now,
That salty MSG laden brownish black liquid that apparently you can put on anything if you look at the bottle, from eggs to popcorn to all these various things.
Popcorn. Oh, Jesus.
I've seen it, man. I've seen people put fish sauce on
Oh,
popcorn.
my
It's
God.
crazy.
Well, for those that don't know, here's how you make fish sauce. You get a clay pot, fill it with fish, put it in the sun, and leave. Come back in about 6 months, scoop it out. There's your fish sauce, and maybe add a couple of spoonfuls of salt. I hate fish sauce. It's
Do you really?
so disgusting. It stinks. And I'm gonna get. You know what I'm gonna say? What I'm about to say is distasteful. It's crude. It's even rude. But don't shower tomorrow. When you get home from work, go to the gym, run 10K on the treadmill, lift some weights, come home, take your hand, and just rub that down in your nether regions really good. Then smell your hand. That's fish sauce. It's disgusting. I hate it. I don't understand how people sprinkle extra fish sauce on their food.
So let me tell you about fish sauce. As an aside, my wife and I, Sheila, with the other podcast that we produce called This One Time, the podcast, one of the things that we give our supporters on Patreon, not you, listener of the Bangkok podcast, but for the listeners of This One Time, the podcast, we send patrons a postcard every month. And some of those patrons get a postcard with a little something extra on, from the areas at which we travel. Guess what I put on this month's postcard send?
A little thing of fish sauce?
Fish sauce. They're all stained with fish sauce. And I drew an arrow to it and said, scratch and sniff.
Scratch and puke, more like it. I get that fish sauce is a central ingredient to a lot of Thai dishes.
Right.
And it's, for instance, it's in lab mu, minced pork with spices, which is one of my all-time favorite dishes. And I love the food that it's already in.
Yeah.
But I don't understand how people pull it off the side of the table and use it as a condiment. It just makes me want to vomit. It stinks so bad.
All right. Clearly, we understand how you feel about that. You feel about fish sauce the way I feel about ketchup.
We're done here.
Seriously, I don't put ketchup on anything. Nothing.
Not even macaroni and cheese?
Oh, what is wrong with you Canadians? My God, that's disgusting. I will, if I'm having meatloaf, which is very rare because wife vegetarian, and I know meatloaf is it's baked with ketchup as part of the process, that's fine. If I go out and get a burger and I forget to tell them if it comes with ketchup, I'm not going to worry about it. However, the thought of putting additional ketchup on anything is anathema to me. So I don't mind fish sauce, and in fact, I do sprinkle additional fish sauce because I like a good salty, fishy flavor. Doesn't bother me at all. But ketchup.
Next time you and I go out for street food, I'm bringing like a little divider. I'm going to put it up between us. You have your food, I'll have mine. We can still talk to each other, but I'm not looking at your food.
We should do a food fight. Fish sauce versus ketchup. What could go wrong?
Good.
Well, we will have to agree to disagree on that particular element. But hey, listen, before we go, Greg, you might not have noticed this, Greg, since you are a Canadian living in Thailand, but the Brits, they love the Bangkok podcast.
Our former colonial masters. Hello, Britain.
Thanks, guys, and still yours, apparently. Anyhow, well, at least one Brit specifically who was kind enough to leave us a fantastic review over on the UK iTunes store. I don't know if you know this or not, listener and or Greg, but reviews are country-specific on iTunes, so you kind of have to go hunt them down. When I did a little hunting and I found out that J. Robert that's his real name, I guess. J. Robert double M said, and that's how he would say it because he's British. They don't say MM, they would say double M.
J. Robert double M. Australian? Jamaican? I don't know.
He said we had an informative and good quality podcast. And then he went on to say that he was really enjoying the insights, even though he has recently moved to Kanchanaburi, way out in the western wilds of Thailand. So he's in Kanchanaburi now and thinks we should keep up the podcast, and this is how he stays up with with life in Bangkok. So thank you very much for saying nice things about us, J. Robert, MM.
That's really cool. Thanks, J. Robert, MM. So before we go, I just want to give a quick final mention about our Patreon page. If you head to patreon.com/Bangkok podcast, you too can get early access to the show, bonus content, and special patron-only swag for just a few bucks, which also helps keep the show going and free of advertisements. And finally, thank you to you for listening to the Bangkok podcast. If you have something on your mind or just want to drop us a line to say hello, please leave a comment on bangkokpodcast.com, or you can reach out directly to me on Twitter, where I am BKK Greg.
Or you can send a message to us either on Facebook or on Twitter or online, where we are at Bangkok Podcast. We are very good at responding to comments, questions, and even the heaps of praise people like to lord over or onto us. So wherever you do it, we will probably see it. Thanks very much for that. For Greg Jorgensen, I am Evo Terra. We shall be back here next week with more stories of our lives lived in the City of Angels, right here on the Bangkok Podcast. Chok ti krap!
On the front end of the show, it would take, fuck, let me just say this again. Let me just read what I wrote.
Maybe just read what you wrote. Yeah, that read really
Sorry.
good that way.
I forgot that I wrote that.